What struck me from the presentation and also from the comments you made in relation to jobs in the oil and gas industry, and if I can quote you, the Talos, the Cosmoses, you said they're employing about 200 people.
Yeah.
And so where are the jobs? My first comment is going to focus on that. We must understand that exploration and production companies do not employ many people. They don't employ many people. The Talos, the Cosmoses that you mentioned are exploration and production companies. Those that employ many people are the service companies whose services are procured by the exploration and production companies. And so the Halliburtons are those who employ many people because they actually do the job for the exploration and production companies. And so it is important we understand this going forward. Secondly, if you want to assess the number of local Ghanaians who have benefited through local content, we can look at that from two perspectives. Number one, in terms of the employment, and number two, in terms of the value of contracts awarded to local suppliers. As far as employment, in 2015, we had the numbers estimated at 4,900 Ghanaians. This increased to 11,320 Ghanaians in 2016. There is a reason for this. The level of employment is correlated, directly correlated with the level of activity, upstream activity. And so the more development of fields going on, the more jobs are created. And it is also important fluctuating. When there is an activity, you have many jobs. When there is no activity, you lay off workers. That is not the ideal situation we want to build as a country for our oil and gas industry. We want to be able to sustain the jobs. Now, one way of sustaining the jobs is to increase activity. Now, by increasing activity, we have to allocate more oil blocks to serious companies. In the past, companies were awarded blocks, companies that did not have the track record, they did not have the money, they did not have technology, and some of them have held on to oil blocks for several years without any activity. We have to move away from that practice and engage companies that have the track record. It is for this reason government has decided to commence what we call a licensing and bidding round, and this will be launched on Friday, coming Friday, where companies will have to compete for the blocks, and companies that have the track record that can prove that they can undertake their minimum obligation and ensure that we make as many discoveries as possible and ensure that we develop as many fields as possible. and ensure that we increase and sustain production. And when that is done, we increase the revenue the state is entitled to. They are the companies we are looking for. And so when we do this, we will be able to increase activity, and through that, not only create many jobs and more jobs, but also sustain the jobs. The second thing we have to do is to train our people in a manner that they can diversify their skills as far as demand for them are concerned. How do we do this? Government has recognized that in the past, the focus has been on engineering, geology, etc., etc. But the bulk of the jobs are in the middle level. The welders, the straighters, the carpenters, the electricians, the mechanics. And so our policy now is to put emphasis on the training of these people. And in training them, we are not training them only for the oil and gas industry. I'm talking about diversified skills. We are training them so that they can be of service to other industries when the oil industry doesn't have any activity. For instance, welders. If you train welders to the best level, there is welding in oil and gas, there is welding in construction, there is welding in many aspects of our economic development. If you train mechanics to the highest level, when there is no oil and gas, there are other industries where they can fit in. That is how we can also sustain the jobs. And finally, how do we sustain the jobs? We have to also recognize that the oil industry is not a local industry. When people talk about local content, let us understand that oil industry is not a local industry. It is a global industry. That industry is in Ghana, it's in Mexico, it's in the United States of America, it's in China. It is a global industry. And once you train somebody well, that person can work in Ghana, can work in the US, can work in Mexico. That is the kind of training we have to provide to our people. So that when there is less oil activity in Ghana and there is more in Togo, our people can be exported there. And this is why our president doesn't like the word local content. He prefers to use Ghanaian content. Because when you say local content, it is as if the activity must necessarily take place in Ghana. But when you say Ghanaian content, we want to promote Ghanaian content in America, in the economy of the US, in the economy of China, in the economy of Mexico. We want to promote Ghanaian content. And so these are what our government is looking at as far as creating jobs are concerned for the oil and gas industry. Let me also draw attention to this. You cannot create the jobs if you don't have minimal infrastructure that will catalyze the local content. Ghana hasn't made that significant effort yet in creating that infrastructure. This government has decided to look at three things. The first one is the Tema shipyard. If we can reactivate the Tema shipyard, vessels running through West Africa will be brought there for repairs, whether there is oil activity or no oil activity. We want to also develop a fabrication yard in the Western region, because fabrication offers enormous opportunity for us, not just in terms of job creation, but in terms of value addition. Nigeria, for instance, and the presenter mentioned rightly, Nigeria, the focus has been on three subsectors as far as the oil and gas industry is concerned: fabrication, installations, and construction. And every year, up to 11 billion US dollars is spent on these three subsectors in Nigeria. That is how they retain the money in their economy. We also want to develop a fabrication yard so that we can fabricate the top parts of FPSOs. We can fabricate other smaller, equipments and parts that are needed, not just by the oil industry, but the shipping industry generally. And thirdly, we also want to set up an offshore supply base offshore supply base that will provide services to the entire West African oil and gas industry. Liberia is next to us. Nigeria is here. They all can be given those services. And so when we do this, local spend, contracts awarded to local companies. I believe we haven't gotten to the desired level, but we have seen some progress in that respect. Rising from 118 million US dollars in 2015, and that was 5% of total spent by oil companies. 5% of total spent by oil companies was contracts awarded to local companies. It increased to 534 million in 2016, and that was 11%. In 2017, it increased to, it actually reduced to 417 million, but the total spend also reduced significantly to 900 million. And so if you take the percentage, that's about 47%. And so local spend is relative. It depends on the total spend. But we are seeing some progress. Before I give it to Pauline, I'd like to correct a certain impression. When we hear from the presentation that local content is expensive, local content does not encourage foreign direct investment, we must understand that every international company that comes into Ghana must see the development of local capabilities, must see the desire to spend part of the money they are going to invest here as part of and an important integral part of their business model, but not see it as a requirement by legislation or by an institution. It is not a good business model where you want to go and invest in a country and you don't have as an integral part of your business model the need to give to the country in terms of value addition, in terms of supporting local capability development. It is bad business model. And so we must see that as part of our normal business operation. But when we see it as punishment, as a requirement by law, then we miss the point. And therefore, I would like to encourage us, all the companies that want to invest, before you even come, you must study the country's capabilities. Where the skills are lacking, it must be part of your business model to support, to develop the skills. Because it is expensive for you to bring an expatriate from another country to come and do business here and take care of them and their families, compared with having a local person who is skilled to do the same job. And I was talking with my very good friend only yesterday about a Ghanaian who was working elsewhere. And when a company, an international oil company here, offered him 7,000 US to come down to Ghana with his family, compared with an expatriate who was being paid $14,000 here. The Ghanaian was so happy to have heard of $7,000 in Ghana, because relative to our economy, $7,000 is so much. Relative to the economy of the foreigner or the expatriate, 14,000 may not be so much. And so when you help us develop our skills and you recruit them, the benefit to you far outweigh in terms of cost than bringing an expatriate from another country. The locational allowances you will pay alone is equivalent to the salary a Ghanaian will take, even though that Ghanaian may be capable of doing the same thing when well trained. And so if we understand this, we will not see local content as a disincentive. We will rather partner with the government to ensure that we provide the skilled manpower, we provide the infrastructure, and together we define the environment within which we will work so we will mutually benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. So total spend increased from $118 million to $534 million.
value of contracts awarded to Ghanaians.
Yes, that's
as
what I'm referring to. We are talking Ghanaian content. Yes.
As a percentage of total spend.
Yes. So, and then it fell in value, but increased in percentage terms in 2017. These figures look very good. You are inching closer to what's happening in the mining sector. But it will be interesting to know what value that Ghanaians employed in the sector. As you mentioned, you know, the figures are increasing. The value that they earn compared to their foreign counterparts. Maybe we can have a conversation about that later.